Sziasztok, üdv mindenkinek, elkezdjük. Angolul lesz ma mindkét beszélgetés, tekintettel a külföldi vendégekre, úgyhogy váltok is. Hi everyone, hello guys, thanks for coming here and being here with us and dig into the topic of bookings and promoting and live shows and tours and such. I'm going to introduce our guests for today. First we have Stefan Juhlin from Sweden. And Stefan is a co-founder, managing director, and agent at Pitch & Spiss, based in Stockholm, Sweden. He founded the company in 2007 with Kalle Landgren Swiss. And after a while, they established the company in London as well and put their headquarters there. But after 8 years, they are now back in Sweden and running the company from there. I'll ask about why you did the move to London and how it benefited the company, but that's for later. And the agency nowadays represents acts like Caribou, Jose Gonzalez, Viagra Boys, and you have your personal roster with Michelle Gurevich, Wolvenhand, David Eugene Edwards, McTree White, Alice Bowman, to name a few. And Máté Horváth, he's a promoter at Live Nation Central Eastern Europe. And Máté started his career in the live industry as a DIY promoter under the brand New Beat. And he eventually became in-house promoter of iconic underground club Durakert, as well as Budapest Park, which is the largest open-air music venue in Central Europe, but you know that. And he booked several festivals in Hungary as well. But nowadays he's promoting big-ticket acts, including Tegan and Sarah, Rise Against, Sum 41, Billy Idol, Iggy Pop, RJ, 5 Seconds of Summer, and many, many others. And working with Live Nation, as I said before. So thanks again for having being here for this talk. And let's dig in. First, to clarify a little bit the differences between what you do as a promoter and as a booking agent. Let's start with you, Máté, as a promoter. That's a bit more unknown area, I think.
Thank you and welcome everybody. Well, I'm the buyer, so that's the easiest way to explain that the agent is selling the artist, the promoter is buying. But on the broad spectrum, the promoter is the responsible person for the show to happen in the right manner. The promoter is the person who is offering the guarantee for the artist. And, well, it's in modern ways, we can call it project manager, I think so. So it's like the person whose butt is kicked if anything goes wrong. And of course, then other butts getting kicked, but that's the person who is the person who is signing the contract with the artist. I think that makes this the clearest. And also it's depending on how big is the market, what kind of shows we can get. But on my end, I'm also the person who starts to look for the artist, decides if it's a good idea to promote or not, decides a good idea to offer or not. So it's also a talent scouting thing what you are doing, but generally the promoter is the responsible person for the exact show.
Okay, thanks.
Hello everyone. I guess on the agent side, as an agency, most agencies do represent their artists for the whole of Europe or the whole of worldwide, except for North and South America. So we're always the closest to the artist or the management, and it's sort of the overlooking part for the international touring for an artist. So we're basically the middleman between the artist or management and the promoter, making sure that the promoter is doing a good job and also making sure that the artist is providing whatever is needed for the promoter in order for them to do their job, and also being close with the labels and the PR companies. So we're sort of the little spider there in between everything, trying to make sure that the concerts and the live touring is going as smooth as possible, and also responsible for all the administration, making sure that they're signing the contract, and if there anything that is unclear with that, just to clear everything out before the concert is happening. And by the end of it, just making sure that the artist is getting paid what they are owed.
Do you work on a case-by-case basis with promoters or with bookers and bands, or it's more like a structured relationship where you have a contract with an agency, let's say, or with a label? In your case,
the funny thing with the live industry is that most agencies don't even have, like, we don't have any signed contracts with the artist at all. Like, it's just a gentleman's agreement, basically. So anyone is free to leave whenever they want, but there are pros and cons with this because it's also there needs to be a trust in between the two parties, between the artist and the agent. And if you don't want to work together, there's no reason for you to be tied to a contract and continue working with the agent for another 2 years, because that's not going to benefit anyone, really. So it's a kind of a risky position you're in that sense. But at the same time, the only thing we're investing is actually, we don't invest money per se into a project. Like, we invest a lot of time, and with the time that you invest, you also build a strong relationship to the artist. So most of the time, like, if everything is working fine, then the artist will most likely stay with you, and if you have that sort of strong relationship. But then when it comes to, like, we decide as an agency which promoter we think is best for the artist in each territory. So if there's an artist that we think that Máté would do really well in Hungary, then we will talk with you. Or if we think there's a better promoter for this specific artist, then we talk to that promoter. So it depends.
okay. And in case of Live Nation,
There is no such thing as, I mean, at least as I know, there is no such thing as exclusivity between a promoter and an agency. So, the agent, as said, can always decide to go to another venue, go to another promoter, as well as the promoter can always reach out to an agent and say that, hey, we never worked together, but I really like this artist. Why wouldn't make a try? And then, of course, somebody might never answer to you. So that's a thing. But we, on the other hand, we invest money. So, like, the promoter is investing money and also time into an artist. And as said, an artist can just decide one day to another to go to another agent. You don't know that agent. He's working or she's working with somebody else, and then it's gone. You did 2 or 3 shows, and of course, it sounds gloomy, but there are many artists who are bringing their tour book to the new agent and telling that, look, we had a very good time in Hungary, so we want to go with this guy on. But still the agent can tell that, okay, but I don't like this guy. So it's a very human, there are a lot of emotional parts in it. With some agents, it's just very difficult to work with. Another person can work very easy with. So we don't have any kind of agreement like that. So we have no agreement with Pitch & Smith that every Pitch & Smith artist has to play in Hungary by Live Nation. So there is no such thing. Of course, there are some agents who I'm working with together for, 14 years. And they always come to me first with their bands. And, I might just say that, sorry, I don't think it makes any sense. And then he might or she might move on to somebody else.
Despite of this, do you see a lot of loyalty in the industry, or the opposite?
I think it depends on the person. It's very individual. Like, some agents are not loyal whatsoever, and they only go for the money. And then some agencies are very, very loyal, maybe to a point where to stupidity, almost like. But it really depends on the person. It's very individual, I would say.
And the thing is, what I was working for 7 years at the Dutch management company. It was a side job for me. We were managing Dutch bands. The management is still working. I'm just myself not working there. So that company managed a bunch of artists, and it was very interesting for me to be on the other side, because I was kind of an agent for those bands, to see that, you tend to think that, the agents are so evil because they always want more money and stuff like that. And then you see that actually the artist and the management is the person, just on loyalty. If I I'm not offering enough money, but there is somebody else who is offering enough money, there is loyalty, but there is an exact amount of euros where you say that, well, I mean, we have very good relationship, but this is 50% more, and the band just needs that money, and of course, a good agent always recognizes that it's a very high offer, but a totally unknown person, because an email can bring away as many zeros as you want, so you can offer whatever you want, but the agent will be able to explain to the artist that, look, this is a high offer, but this festival never existed before, and I don't know this guy, and on and on. But still, the artist can still say that, but we want this because we love, I don't know, gulyás leves, and then we want to go to Hungary. So.
And in terms of like power dynamics, you sound like you bear most of the risk, and you less of the risk. Maybe is that a true reading of the situation?
Financially, yes. Yeah, the promoter is definitely the one, and that's also like if an agent is recognizing this as well, just like you said, that you bring a band for the first time, you probably lose money on the first 3 shows, and then as soon as the artist is starting to make money, if you would then move, you would probably destroy the relationship between the agent and promoter. So that's
and in the protection of all the agents, that the promoter is the person who's losing the money on that night, so that's a very quick dry loss what can happen, but the agent and the agency is losing money on the long run, because booking shitty shows, not getting paid is making your company look bad, so bands might decide to leave you, and on the long run you are also losing money, but that takes a bit more time, but the actual loss is happening on the promoter side, obviously.
And when it comes to building up a band, like the profile of a band in a certain country, how can you convince a promoter to take this risk, and put the band on a show?
And that's always that. It also really depends on the artist. I think it's more and more so these days that the artists themselves needs to see some sort of a potential growth in that territory, because they are also investing money most of the time. Like if you get 300 euros to play the first show, you're definitely going to lose money on that. So it's a matter of trying to find some sort of common ground between everyone. Like try out a first show, and that could be by just like, first of all, like we want to love the music, like both from the agent side and the promoter, in order for us to do a good job. But then it's a matter of seeing, like, is there something here that could really, would this artist work really well in Hungary, because they sound in a very specific way that could attract a crowd in this country. It's all about up for discussion with the promoter, and if the promoter says, like, maybe it's too early to do this now, but let's look at this after the next album, and see if, or like, let's put this on a free entry festival and see what the reaction is like. And so that's our job. The biggest job as an agent is in the early career of an artist. The bigger the artist is, the easier it gets. And it's the same on the promoter side, even though it could be, there's still a bigger financial risk for a promoter when you have Coldplay playing, of course, but at the same time, it's pretty straightforward. So most of the work is coming in the beginning, when just trying to figure out if it makes sense for a band to play in that city.
Yeah. So, and how do you decide when you want to build a band, or you see the potential in a band? What's the strategy?
Well, after making a couple hundred wrong decisions in the last 15 or something years, it's there is always a discussion that, data, we should look at the data here, but it's not really there. I mean, for Hungary. And I remember those days before GDPR was on there were these websites which were fetching the Facebook likes for exact artists, which was really, I mean, that was literally working, like that was really covering the reality of the market. But now, even...
Sorry, when you could see like how many people liked from a certain country?
It was before 20...
And even a city, right? You can,
yes, you could narrow it down to a city. But in Hungary, it's Budapest, basically. Budapest and its 40-kilometer radius is where you can really sell tickets. So it was easy for us. But in reverse. In those days, the economy was still not great after the Great Depression. But basically, now we are paying for services like, sound charts, stuff like that. But sadly, after an exact amount of streams, which I think it's like the 0.5% of the gross total plays, your country is not shown on Spotify, for example, which is, Hungary is usually there. Mm-hmm. So if there is an artist streamed, crazy in Australia, US, and Poland is usually in the top 5 or top 10, Hungary is very rarely. So these kind of data inputs are not really working. Sometimes you can ask the agent, and the agent will get the data from management. That helps a lot. But what you do is basically, you have a gut feeling. You say that, this sounds like something will work, and then it might work. Sometimes, there are still these kind of favors. It's not as in the stories of the old days that if you don't do this show, then you won't get Metallica. So these kind of things are not really existing anymore. At least I don't see them. But there are agents who you have a relation with, and they tell you that, look, we need to make one more show on the way between Vienna and Krakow, and then you are like, if it's not something crazy unviable in Hungary, then you will just do it. And I did it while I was still independent. So it's taking risks is something a promoter has to do. So you can't always go for the gold because it's not working.
But do you look at the band immediately in terms of several shows in advance that you think, okay, now I do this one, but let's see how it turns out, and if it works out, then a bigger. So
yeah. That's what you hope. So normally you do a show in a 100 cap, 200 cap room, or you put the artist on as a support on a bigger show, and then you are like, next time I hope when they get back, they will sell the same room out with a bit higher ticket prices, and then we can go to the next level. But it takes years, and as said, it costs a lot of money. And I learned it also when I was working on the other side, that, going on the road and having a gross guarantee of 800 euros is a loss. So 800 euros is not enough to cover the driver, the sound engineer, the gas, and the accommodation. It's just not enough. So all the bands who are touring and starting their careers in this way, they're also losing money. And that's why you have to have a strong domestic market, or you have to have a label who is helping you in this way. But everybody's losing money, so that's important to know. So that's why it's a very hard, there was this AC/DC song about it's a long way to the top.
Yeah, and from the perspective of a band who wants to break into a newer territory where maybe they have a little, traction, some sort of data that, okay, people listen to them there. What would be your tips or suggestions how to approach a booking agent or a promoter? Actually, which one would be the better choice for a band, to look for an agent first or look for a promoter?
I think it depends a little bit which. If we're talking about Hungary, if you're a domestic band here, you should definitely start with a promoter, to try to get shows here through some a promoter who can sort of help.
Yeah, sorry, about like internationally, so for Hungary and going abroad.
Yeah. Going abroad, I think probably start with promoters around. Like if you want to go to Berlin, try to find a club in Berlin that is doing similar type of music and putting on smaller artists and that kind of thing. I think an agent, even though like agents do sign artists very, very early on now, but I think it really, the reason why agents sign artists so early nowadays is because there's so many agents, and it's like the competition is really, really tough. But I think it's also maybe even more so with American artists or artists from the UK, where you never know. Like it's really a gamble, and as said before, like we don't actually invest any money in it, so it's quite easy for us to just say like, yeah, let's work together and see what happens, and then nothing could possibly never happen. That could be one option, but I would say the best way to try to do it is probably try to play shows in the bigger cities, in Paris, Berlin, Amsterdam, and just try to find people that understands your music and are willing to put you on for the night. That would probably be my recommendation. Yeah.
Máté, you see any?
Well, I
tips?
always have this mantra that I think the best. I mean, first you need to know where people wants to listen to you. So, and that's why the data, what doesn't help me at all, helps you a lot if you have a band and you have, you can see that there is 122 people streaming you in Ljubljana. That's very important. That's 122 people listening to your music, which doesn't seem to be a lot, but it's much better than the people in Berlin maybe or Warsaw. So you should go to places where people want to hear you, because on the other end, I understand most bands want to play in London or want to play, Hamburg, but if nobody is really interested in you in Hamburg, then you shouldn't go there, because it's, the promoter will lose money, you will lose money, and you will have a very bad night after it. So there will be a tension in the band, if we are talking about the band. So normally you should first choose where to go to, and then I think, in the early 2000s it was working really well that, there were other bands playing the similar music, like I never played music. I'm just saying that if I would have a band, I would try to find another band which is similar to mine and ask them, why don't we do an exchange show? And then, you go to play with them, they come to you and play with you. And this is a very strong, you have to really trust these people, and they have to trust you, because there are dozens of stories that bands invited the other band and then they never got called back, because maybe the other band split up, which, it happens. Sometimes they just get, tricked into it. So this is something what helps. And of course, trying a club promoter, trying to find a junior promoter is also a great way. But I think finding an agent or aiming for an agent is something I think it doesn't make really sense, because the agent will go for you. So if you are selling well, you have a story. Like we sold out 3 shows in Poland. Maybe it was just 200 capacity, but you sold out, and that's a story. So that's where you can go to Czech Republic and on, and then there will be somebody, so this band is returning to this city again because they sold out. That's something when people will, it will tick, and they will risk their money.
Perhaps agents are just more visible, like bookers are more visible on social media anywhere, because just you have a company and you're just a bit better represented visually for if somebody wants to search and find a foothold, whereas promoters are a bit less visible in that sense, or at least that's my experience, but maybe that's not the case.
And that's true, and I think that's the reason why most agencies now only have like an info address, because I can just imagine the amount of emails you are getting, because I was working in Dürerkert for long years, and the booking@dürerkert.com email address was flooded with these emails of 20 megabytes attached MP3 files and all these things. And I don't want to be a douche, but you never listen to it. It's just too much, and it's an unsolicited email. You will never really open it. So that's true. Agencies are they have their own crest on the street, so you can just tell this is the agency here. But you can find the clubs, and I still think it's easier to find the artist. It's easier to find a band which is similar to yours and start a relationship in that way.
Because in an older interview I found you said that there aren't too many promoters in Hungary specifically, so maybe that's different in other countries, and maybe that's changed. So
too many promoters.
Too many? No, there aren't.
And it's still on. I can still hold that what I said back then. Yeah, there are not a lot, and there are very few promoters who are open to lose money. So it's something you really don't want to do normally, I think so. So that's true. But in Budapest, we have a very strong venue-focused promoter market. So you can still, go at 8:38, and they have this very small room in the bow of the ship, or they have this terrace. And I'm pretty sure that if you are coming from Slovenia, there is a good reception for you on that level. But it doesn't mean that people will go to your show. So I think the most important is to have people. So it's not, the main thing is not to play a show. The main thing is to have people watching you playing your show. That's the most important part.
Yeah, so you've been to the trenches, working with in a very DIY way, and you too early on, And you have a very peculiar taste, Máté, and very adventurous in terms of bringing bands. And so how has this changed now that you work for Live Nations? Can you still be that adventurous and bring in exciting stuff, or you have to be more, take less risks, let's say?
Actually, I mean, if somebody is looking at the shows we are doing now in Budapest, the craziness is not gone. So you can see some really, it's a broad range of genres and a broad range of shows. I didn't change in any way. I mean, Live Nation, the agreement, which is not something very public, but Live Nation started to work with me because they wanted to have what I was doing. So obviously, if you are playing with your own money, you can lose as much as you. Well, it's not as much you want, but as long as you can. If you have an employer, it's not the same. So there is a reason why you have to be more careful. But I still do crazy things, I can say. So.
Yeah, and I heard it. So the strategy was to play more shows in clubs and get into clubs a bit more with Live Nation acts. Is that still?
Well, it's, I mean, the company strategy is not something I can share or I can comment
it was
on
just
it.
in articles.
But having club shows is very important in all, because the way how artists are breaking nowadays is, the clubs are very important, and that's very obvious, because sometimes a band is playing for 200 people and the next time it will be 2,000, which was not the case, years ago. And now, actually, we are already skipping the clubs. So some artists are just breaking without ever, I'm not trying to get into the TikTok mantra thing, but, this is literally happening, that an artist barely existed and now headlining Sziget Festival. So, but it doesn't mean that clubs are not important. I'm just saying that this is getting really fast. And sometimes you trust that something just literally broke on TikTok, let's say. You book the artist and maybe 4 months later it's not even that interesting anymore. So,
so it works
it's
both
very
ways,
fast.
the speed,
It's very fast.
Yeah. So talking about England, a lot of band wants to move to London and trying to make it there. So you moved your company there. What was the idea behind it, and also why did you leave?
First of all, there was never really the plan to. I ended up in London for various different, for random reasons, and we sort of felt that we really noticed the difference as soon as we moved the company and had a UK address. There was something that happened with the perception of the company, even though it's not like people don't trust the Swedish company per se, but I think it was more American companies for sure that. Just because you all of a sudden had a London address, they took you seriously. Otherwise, you were just the farmers out in Europe, living in Stockholm, that you really didn't have any clue what we were doing. And UK has always been such an important market, especially in America, that has always been seen as when you break it in America, the next thing you do is the UK, and then you can take it from there. But that UK and still is such an important market for artists and record labels. But it was also that all our competitors, most of our competitors are based in London. The big agencies are there, but also a lot of smaller agencies. So he just felt like the right move to just be present there, and also just to be taken a little bit more serious by our competitors, that they actually saw that now they're here and they go into the same shows as we do. So we noticed that we had the eyes on us in a different way.
Sorry to interrupt. Were you promoting or booking Swedish acts working from London, or?
We have always been working with both some Swedish acts, but the majority of the roster has always been international. So a lot of Canadian and a lot of American artists, and we noticed that there were even more, especially American labels that were coming to us than before. But also a lot of UK labels. UK labels before we moved to UK never really wanted to work with us, because they wanted to work with someone who was in the same city, which I can totally understand, because they're friends, they meet at the pub, they go to shows together. So of course they're going to ask their friend if they have a new hot act that they want someone to book. But as soon as we moved there, we sort of became part of that little circle.
It seems a bit close circle, like the UK agents. It was
It's
probably
very small,
not an
yeah.
easy thing to break into that and build credibility. Like, why would an American act trust in two Swedish guys, to do the shows, no? And instead of the old British ones.
No, but I think it's and that's we were fortunate enough to have a couple of artists that were doing really well. So at the time, like we were with Caribou from the beginning when they started becoming something. But even before that, we were working with the Gossip. Were on the roster when we started. That were one of the co-headlines of Reading Leeds at the time. So all of a sudden, when you have artists like that, they obviously think, okay, these guys must be doing something right, because a lot of other agents try to poach the artists. They try to just like, you can't work with those random guys from Sweden. Like, you need to be with us. But when the artists were more just like, but they're doing a great job. They should. We're going to stay with them. Then other artists, stuff like that is such a small world. So. Rumors like that are spreading quickly if there's a new. Also, I think we also had a little bit different approach to the work itself than some other UK agencies. Like UK agents at the time probably needed some competition from outside of UK, because they sort of could do whatever they wanted, and they had a very arrogant way of working with people from outside the UK that is like, we don't care about going to Hungary or Poland, like that they just saw like France, Germany, and UK. That's what's important. The rest is just like, whereas we always had a different perspective of it, that we thought the whole of Europe has great potential. Like, you can do great money in Poland if you make it there. You can make great money in Hungary or wherever in Eastern Europe or Central Europe or even the Balkans. So I think we, just because we didn't come from the UK, we also had a different view of it.
That's interesting. And what happened then? Why did you go back?
So the pandemic happened, basically. I decided to leave already before that. I left the UK in 2019, but we kept the office there, and I was going back and forth a lot. And then the pandemic happened, and as you all know, like there was a hard hit on the live industry in general. And we just decided we were contemplating a lot of what to do with ourselves during that time. Is it ever going to go back to normal? It was, I mean, everyone knows that it was very uncertain what was happening. So we just had to make some, of course, because of the financials as well, that we just need to make a change somehow. So we decided to divide the company in two, and some of the agents started a new company, and I was already back in Stockholm, so we just felt there was a need of just regrouping and go back to the basics. Because we also asked ourselves, like, when do we have the most fun running this company? And the most fun we actually had when we were 3 people in a basement. So we're sort of just going back to those times, and just like, let's just make things simple now and see what happens, and then we might rebuild from there. But we were fortunate enough to also keep all the big artists during this time. So it was just nice to just like slow down a little bit. I think it was good for the whole industry to slow down a little bit, because also a lot of the unserious players out there disappeared because the money was gone. So it was just, I think a lot of other agencies did the same thing, where a lot of agents had to leave the agencies because they didn't make any money, and it felt like it was a big shuffle happening there. So at the time it felt right, and it still feels that it was the right thing to do.
Yeah, there were a few topics I wanted to touch on. Like, for example, also asking you, Máté, that you go to the UK a lot, but do you think that it still has the relevancy and cultural influence that it had earlier? Or, I mean,
Like
throughout the 20th.
The UK musically, or
The scene?
Yeah, the scene and just the whole like UK industry in general.
yeah, the industry
Is it still
has.
that relevant, or
Yeah, I think the industry has. I mean, it's something a bit difficult because things are literally happening in these days and these few years, and the balance is just, you know, a bit shifting towards Europe a bit more. You know, I think it's Brexit and many other things, but there are more and more artists on this side of the channel who are breaking and selling visible amount of tickets on visible prices. So something is happening, but it's still pretty much the UK was the center of it. And I think it's very much because of the US and Canada, and Australia is a very important music export market. And funny enough, we are closer to Australia than London, but still, you know, everything is arriving to London and then it's being spread around. So the music-wise, I think it's much more like saturated now. Like Europe is delivering more, but still, I mean, all the agencies are not all, but most of the agencies are still in London, and that's something what, you know. If you want to meet with them, it's much more easy for us than we just going there and we meet. And if the agency was started to spread around in Europe, that would be a bit more difficult to catch up with people. But you know, the really important spots where you can meet with all the artists and management and agents are still like, you know, ILMC, IFF, Great Escape, and of course there are very important showcase festivals in Europe, like mainland Europe. But still, these are the main ones. It might change by time, of course. I'm not saying that this is something set in stone and staying like that.
But I think it's also important to say that a lot of the, especially the big UK agencies, are owned by American corporates. Like they're all tied together now, which didn't used to be the case. You had two that were like worldwide, but this is happening across the board now. Also for. So it's like then you do have an office in LA, New York, London. That's just how it's sort of the how it's done on that level.
And even management companies nowadays. Yeah. So now management companies are also becoming multinational, and yeah, everybody's opening the office in London. So that's something, but just it might be a habit, but that's how it goes.
You mentioned that more acts are breaking from Europe. Like, what do you think is that? What's the reason behind it?
We just discussed before the panel started that just in the last two Eurovisions, you know, there were some artists which were really out of the regular Eurovision setup. I think it's the internet. It's a much more easier streaming services. It's just the artists are able to get in touch with the audiences without having a big label in a big skyscraper in London or wherever. So that might be one of the reasons. And also the reason how all the music reaching out to the people and they get inspired and start to play music in their own country, influenced by an English or US artist, but still changing it to their own country's flavor, it's working, as it seems. And people are more open to this kind of music all across Europe.
Do you have acts from Europe more and more?
A little bit more. It's still very, very much like a lot of North American, a lot of Swedish, and for the more known territories. But we definitely see more of that. Like starting working with artists from Spain or German artists that we haven't really been working with before. So it's definitely happening more of that. And I think like some Italian artists, and I think it's like something that has changed a lot is that it doesn't, like we were talking a little bit about this before too, but that's, of course it's great if you sing in English because then you can reach a wider audience, but somehow it feels almost like if you sing in French or if you sing in your native language, that it can be something that is very exotic about it, and that the language itself is a bit less important, but it can be quite cool to listen to an artist who's from Hungary or Georgia or wherever, because it's a like they're all beautiful languages, and I think it can really create like something very unique, and that, like you said, like everything is spread so easily these days. Like a lot of artists can connect directly with their fans, and you don't need to have a big label to support you. Like everything can just spread organically somehow, which I'm very happy to see that's the case. So, but it's definitely internet is definitely the answer to it. Like,
Yeah, okay. Just to open the floor a little bit to questions. Do you have questions? Anyone?
Everyone, I spoke to a guy from a fairly big band in Hungary recently. Told me that at least that's his view in Western Europe, the math doesn't add up, at least for the artist, as well as it does in Hungary, maybe because of the travel and the costs and everything. What's your view on that?
The math is not adding up.
Like financially, yeah,
Yeah.
it's better for an artist locally here as opposed to like Western Europe, for example. That was his view.
What do you think?
that it's sorry to understand it, like it's that it doesn't it's hard to make money here, or like that
To make money here locally as opposed to going out or a band in Western Europe, maybe because of the distances. I don't know what the reasoning was exactly, but
Oh yeah, no, but that could be. I mean, we were talking about that also before. Like that, sometimes, like as an agent, for example, like if I get a tour period of 2 weeks where I have to, of course there are focuses when it comes to touring, like where they really have to play, and that is definitely around Paris, London, that side of Europe. And in order to find a time to get to Budapest, or like we were talking about going to the Balkans, like if you're going to do the whole of Balkans, that's going to add at least another week of touring. And touring for that long, it really needs to like generate enough money for an artist to justify that. So that's definitely a reason why a lot of artists don't go further than Munich, basically.
But also, I mean, it's true if you are a German band, and the German market is, of course, it's very competitive, but there is a lot of places to play, some subsidized venues, so there is money, of course. But if you are from Hungary or Czechia or like smaller Eastern European countries, it's not something what you can live off from. I mean, obviously, most Hungarian artists who are singing in Hungarian, they are living off from the Hungarian market and some cities around in like Slovakia or Romania. But, at a certain point it will be gone. And in Hungary, if you are singing in English, it's a very, very limited territory. So you have to go abroad. And it's not just a question if you have a mission to go abroad and you really want to play in Austria or wherever. But, like after playing Budapest, there are not a lot of things what you can do if you're singing in English only. So that then you have you have some motivation to go abroad and play there.
Did it answer? No? Yeah? Okay. Anyone else? Okay, let's just talk more then. So you both mentioned COVID a little bit, and I don't want to talk about COVID. Just how do you see, we've just bounced from back and everything seems to be going quite hard, I guess, in terms of festival attendances and clubs and a lot of that. Where do you see the trends are heading? Like what are your biggest challenges, let's say, for the next couple of years?
I mean, I think on the agent side, I think things have really gone back to normal in many ways. Like I think a lot of artists do tour a little bit less. They're a little bit more careful with how they spend their time and how they spend their money. Because when I first started 20 years ago, then you could easily book like a 6-week tour and play every single day. That very rarely happens these days. For any artist, like people are quite conservative when it comes to touring. I think it's more on the promoter side where we have noticed, like in terms of ticket sales, like for the established artists, like things are probably better than ever. But for I think the medium-sized acts are sort of struggling a little bit, where you don't know where they are at the moment. Like an artist that usually will play maybe selling 4,000 tickets, that all of a sudden they can be down to 2. You don't really know why that is. Whereas if you're a stadium act and you're a stadium act, most of the time those shows are selling somehow. And then the smaller artists, It's a bit of it's more of a struggle for the really small artists in order to do their first couple of tours, because back in the days you could always play a random show, fill out a day off in a random city in Germany. That doesn't really happen anymore. You play the bigger cities, and if you don't go to Heidelberg just because you happen to drive past Heidelberg if you don't have any fans there. So those type of shows are sort of gone. We'll see if that ever gonna come back. But in one way, I also think it's a bit more of a healthier touring these days. Also, if you think about sustainability and like maybe not just drive around and waste gas and energy of just like to play for 10 people.
Is that truly considered by bands or bookers to really focus on that?
It's getting more and more. It's definitely a topic that is being discussed, and I think it's. But I think it's more that promoters are starting to sort of getting certificates of like green touring and stuff like that. So that's becoming more and more common, I think. But it's still far from a sustainable industry. Let's put it that way.
Yeah, it's the best example is aviation. Like commercial aviation is an industry which is, they are really breaking their necks to be sustainable, because that's the biggest expense. Like buying kerosene is the most expensive if you have an airline. So obviously, what you mentioned, that just playing an extra show in an unknown little city is something you don't do. It's gas question also, but the inflation in Europe, and I mean Hungary is of course like stellar, but many other European countries, every European country had an inflation on a certain level, and the worth of human workforce, which I mentioned earlier, the 700 or 800 euro guarantee you have, almost all the money is spent on labor. So it's not spent on gas. It's spent on the technician, on the driver. And the reason you are not doing just extra shows here and there is that every day costs you, 600 euros net. And then if you have a gross guarantee of 800, then that's not a great idea to do. So that's one thing. And regarding how like the bounce back after COVID, I think still everything is a bit abnormal or shaky. So festivals are the most hard hit. I think so. At least that's what the numbers showing. But some established artists are really just not selling, and exact genres which were very well developed in Hungary, the crowd is facing a very different ticket price range. And there is it's not funny at all, but there is a website which I'm using a lot. It's called Inflation Calculator or something, so you can find it with Google easily. And anytime I set ticket prices, and then people complaining, and I always check how much is that money worth in 2017 forints. And it's just everything became really expensive. But those 2 and 2.5 years of people not going to shows, they were sitting at home with their tickets they kept from the postponed tour. So things became very expensive. And in some, like in the Netherlands, it's something, people say, yeah, everything is very expensive, and then they buy the ticket. But in Hungary, people really, consider what to buy a ticket for and what not. And that makes talent development much more difficult. But this is something what you have to circumnavigate with promotion. You have to, show people that they need to see new artists and all these things. So COVID changed a lot of things. And as you mentioned, it really, cleared out the battlefield a bit. So, and people companies and people who literally were able to go through COVID and come back to the market, they still face a lot of challenges still today. And I think it might take another 2 years when we can say that everything is back to normal, whatever normal is, because
and what do you see on people, like where they spend their money? Do they go to certain festivals only, or less, and spend less on music, or what do you see? What sort of trends?
We don't have a festival in Hungary. what I see generally is that, I mean, this is something it's my idea. It might be not true, but making a decision to buy a festival ticket, you go to the festival in July, and then they go on sale 2 weeks later, and buying a ticket for 200 euros is a very strong commitment, because you know that, okay, it was just only 200 euros, but then you have to go to that festival, you have to live there for a few days, you have to spend your money there on very high prices like drinks, food, beverages, everything. And I think people kind of, I wouldn't say they're afraid of these kind of expenses, but it's like a gloomy little cloud. And then the other option is, let's see a show in a stadium or an arena, which is, the ticket is very expensive, I mean, almost in the same range, like 200 euros, but it's not such a commitment. It's, it's one day. I will buy a t-shirt, 50 euros or 70, and I will drink this and that, but still it's much cheaper and much less of a commitment than a festival ticket. So this is something what I figured out in some way, and this is what the figures show. I think on generally, if you look at the articles, that how many festivals decide to postpone, or just they say they will never do the event again, and all these things. So this is very difficult. I think festivals hit the most, like the hardest. That's what I see.
I mean, it's also a little bit what we have noticed if you just look at the overall Europe, and you probably speak to these festival bookers as well. But it also feels like it's a bit random. Like that some really like small established festivals that have been running for 20 years, all of a sudden they don't sell out their 5,000 tickets for some weird reason. I think a lot of these bookers still trying to figure out why that is, like what they have done wrong, basically, and trying to find their way of like maybe change their lineup a little bit and either go even more niche and just do one very specific thing, or they go even broader. I think that's just like you said. I think the festivals have definitely been hit the worst by this, because just promoting a show is less of a commitment to get people to buy your tickets. And for us on the agency side, like we still book the shows to promoters that want to book our artists. So for us, it has gone back to normal. But for festivals, it's a much greater scale of
Can
everything.
you name a few festivals that bands should aim for, that it's also a good place for them to show themselves, and where agents or promoters would go to be surprised?
I mean, when you have the showcase festivals, I mean, there are a few. Like Eurosonic is always a good one, like definitely, and Great Escape can be a good one if you play if you're lucky. No, but it can be really. It's a bit of a lottery, like all these showcase festivals, because at all the showcase festivals there will be important people. More so, more of them at some, like Eurosonic or Great Escape. But even if you go to and play a showcase festival in Ljubljana, or if you go to Reeperbahn, or like it really depends. Like you need to be a little bit lucky, but you should probably not go there until you have something proper to present. Either that you have an album already, or you have some sort of traction outside of your country. Because you will spend a lot of money, and it could be devastating. Like going so far, play one show, and you think that this could change everything, and then it turns out there are 2 people in the crowd, and those were just random people that just happened to go to the toilet at that specific time. So it's important to not do it too early. I think it's all about the timing, just to wait until you feel that you're ready and you actually have something to sell.
And if it's not showcases, but regular festivals?
That is, I think then the most crucial thing, or the most difficult thing, is actually to be booked. I think then it's probably better to wait until a festival reaches out to you, because it's going to be the same thing if you email like an MP3 to booking@festival.com. No one's going to listen to it. Like the festivals will book stuff that they try to create a lineup that sells tickets, and especially these days, like we just talked about, like for them it's like every euro they're spending is going to be it has to be something that adds up to the general income by the end of it.
Yeah, but some band, you know, think that okay, there's a festival, I go there, at least there's a lot of people, so I'm maybe in a good place, you know, and as a first step, let's say, instead of a small club show.
Yeah, no, I mean, festivals are great for that. Like if you get to play a festival and if you're being booked to a festival, I mean, there are big festivals like Fusion, for example, outside of Berlin is one of those that they tend to book a lot of artists that are fairly unknown, and they pay very little money, but there's 70,000 people there. So if you are lucky and you play the right stage at the right time, then you might gain a lot of new fans. So there are festivals like that are a little bit more open-minded, so to speak. Try to think of more, but Fusion was what came to mind.
Máté, do you have any good suggestions? Or
Since we don't really, you know, I never owned a festival in this way, and I booked several, like I booked Fishing on Orpheus, which was, it's still an amazing festival. It's, I mean, one of the funniest thing, and it makes your life very difficult, but the festival programmer is a great guy. He tells you very fairly that, you know, you deliver them a band which you know it will break. And actually later, 2 years later, it turns out that the band really broke, but he says, I don't like it. And you're, yeah, but you know, they are around and they're already here, so it's not a lot of money. They don't have to fly. Yeah, but I don't like it. So I was working with festivals, and then he tells you that I want this band, and then you know, break your neck to get that band, and it's not. So there are some, and all the bands I brought to that festival in the years, they had a great time there. The crowd had a great time there, but it was never really something that really changed anything for those artists in Hungary, except they had a great memory of that event. But I think it's something what's very country specific. Like there is Electric Castle in Romania, and Romania now has a lot of festivals, very good festivals, and not a lot of club shows. So even if you play at that festival in the right moment when people are really there and listening to your music, there might be no follow-up. So, you know, maybe the other festival will invite you back 2 years later, or the same festival 3 years later, but it's very hard to get a follow-up. And in Hungary, it was pretty similar for years. You know, Sziget is something what everybody knows. Like that's the torch in Hungary on the music landscape. But you know, it's a cool story. Like I was bullied by agents that, yeah, but we played Sziget, we need this kind of money. And I was like, yeah, that's great, but there were no Hungarians seeing your show. So sorry, I have to offer you a smaller capacity, slower fee. And I think it's changing country by country. So in Hungary right now, I can say that you know, a festival like Colorado or I mean, still love Fishing on Orpheus. So if you play at Dát Puszta, then you know your artist might be something to follow, or Inota. You know, the crowd there is recognizing what's happening. You know, if you play at Balaton Sound, it's likely nothing to follow up, but it's a genre-specific thing. Like in Hungary, we don't really have a very strong rock festival, even if we have a very strong rock audience, like a very reliable rock audience, but there is no such like Nova Rock in Austria is something what you can rely on. So if a band is playing there, you can bring them back to a club or to a hall, and it will develop. So I think it's something very hard to say, but anytime you play at a festival, you should know what you are doing and why you are going there. And on showcase festivals, you have to have music, you have to have your team ready. So playing there, spending subsidies and just coming home very sad and hangover, that's doesn't make a lot of sense.
Okay. Any other questions? Because our time is running out for the first session. If not, then it means I asked everything and you answered everything very well. So thank you very much for being here and sharing all these experiences with us. And stay around for the few drinks and maybe listen to the talk. And you guys, we will have a short break now and come back in 5-6-ish minutes, I guess, and then we'll continue with the festival session. Thanks.
Thank you.